Hello, my name is Megan Renee, and this video aims to guide you through several leadership theories and application of these theories in the workplace. As we walk through the video, each theory will be defined and related to use in the workplace. The first theory we will examine is the contingency leadership theory, otherwise known as situational leadership. This theory aims to explain that the leadership style should coincide to the situation at hand, meaning that behaviors should change to meet the situation's need. This is heavily utilized in leadership development and skill training, as leaders need to be able to adapt to change in their organization or their hierarchy or even in the situation that they had begun to work with. This theory is considered to be the third major paradigm of leadership theories and is heavily correlated to conscientiousness. Being conscious of your surroundings and the situation and how people are responding to that situation will aid in implementing this theory, as the style you use is contingent on what the situation brings forward. So you can see, one, where it gets its name, contingency theory, and two, that these two paradigms are intertwined when handling this theory. The second theory we'll cover is the Continuum Theory. This is actually a branch of the contingency theory and kind of views leadership on a scale. So we have two sides to the scale, this continuum that never ends. For example, a lot of sources use autocratic and democratic leadership. We have autocratic, where the higher-ups or the management or the bosses handle most of the decision making. We have democratic leadership, where decision making is a team effort and is usually voted for or processed by all employees, including management, subordinates, interns, etc. This theory proposes that effective leadership styles lie somewhere between these two extremes, if you will. So somewhere between autocratic and democratic leadership, we get this balance of having a higher up to report to, but also being able to take in feedback from other groups and working those together to create an effective leadership style within the hierarchy and the employees of that organization, company, what have you. Is also transferred to boss-centered and subordinate-centered leadership. So you can see how these two parallel autocratic and democratic leadership. So boss-centered really reflects that autocratic leadership style, where the boss, the manager, whoever the higher up is in charge of that control. Whereas in democratic and subordinate leadership, we're really looking towards the engagement of the employees. So this theory, as previously stated, lays that out as almost like a map to where you can find effective leadership styles depending on what you're dealing with in that organization or workplace. Next, we have the path goal leadership theory. So this was developed from the contingency and integrative theories. It was developed around the 1970s. This aims to assess how the behavior of a leader influences the followers. So how a leader acts directly correlates to how their subordinates or their followers are going to act, because they're looking to that person for leadership and guidance. So you can see depicted in the top right, we have an example of this. So we have a question of how development unfolds and where development is pursued. So we have independent and interdependent. We have planned and emergent. So if we have emergent and independent, we make an autonomous development. Whereas planned and interdependent really rely on a networked development. So this examines that contrast also between task and person-oriented leadership. That slippery slope of we need to get the task done, and the person or the employee is the most important. So that kind of continuum that we have continues into this theory of trying to assess the whole picture to include the situation, the behaviors, and what kind of leadership styles we are working with. And this theory emphasizes the correct use of traits for situations regardless of preference for behaviors. What that means is, if a leader has a set style for themselves, and that is how they act, and that's usually how people adopt a leadership style for themselves, is that if a situation arises and their style is not compatible, they have to change in order to meet the goal or follow the correct path to get to the goal. So you can see how this relates back to that contingency theory where we were talking about your behaviors need to adapt to fit the situation you're in. Next, we have leadership substitutes. So these are things that can fall in place instead of a leadership theory or an actual leadership role. These substitutes make the leadership role or leadership kind of redundant. So it's very useful in self-managed teams and includes characteristics of the subordinates, the tasks, and the organization at hand. The best example was an article that covered customer feedback and the subordinates' engagement and satisfaction based on that feedback. With positive feedback and negative feedback, the employees were more driven to contribute and to complete their tasks on time without management needing to step in and say, we need these numbers to increase and we need this to improve. That feedback kind of guided them back into what they needed to do right and what they weren't doing right. So you can see how that substitutes for a manager or a higher up saying, this is what we need to do. It kind of makes an autonomous leadership within the person to hold themselves and their equals accountable. So lastly, we'll apply this to my organization. In athletic training, day-to-day tasks are uncertain. You're not sure what type of injuries you are going to encounter or what type of people you're going to encounter. The processes for injury management are different dependent on the severity. Athlete recognition and injury processing is different, so how an injured athlete handles their injury is different dependent on who they are, their background, if they've been injured before. And coaching, staff, and parent involvement is also another variable in this formula. This is why my organization relies heavily on the contingency leadership theory, and secondary relies on the path to goal leadership, and that really examines our injury process and our recovery process for our athletes, and we use that to kind of help guide them. But mainly the contingency theory applies straight to the athletic training setting because we deal with so many situations in a day that our leadership style has to react in order to handle it correctly and appropriately. So that was a quick recap of the 4 theories and an application to athletic training. Thank you very much for listening. These are the cited sources. And thanks again.